Hi, everyone. Deborah Hamilton, and this is the MAAP Community Call for April 26th, 2023. I'm so glad all of you are here. It's been a whirlwind day today. It's a little cold and a little rainy here in North Carolina. However, my husband left for a trip, and it was really interesting. The first thing I did when we got in the car, because Junie was going with us, was I put the emergency information in for Junie in case something happened to us on the drive. And it was interesting because I couldn't put my husband's name there because he was going on an airplane and he would not be helpful. I did put my son's name there, but I also put the name of two people who are here in North Carolina. In the event something happened to me, they know Junie knows them. I've spoken to them about it, so I put their name in the car. So in the case of an emergency, they would be contacted and they would know what to do with Junie. Just bring them home and throw them in the house. And we'd figure it out from there. But it's so good to see Sally and Stephanie. I'm so glad you guys are here. Today, it's really interesting. And hey, Kieran, good to see you. And Jan's here, great. Today, it's a talk about something that I don't think I have ever talked about. However, I just did a podcast on the Why Do Pets Matter podcast, and I thought it might be a good talk for tonight because my guests, Doug Mintz and Gabrielle Hartley, are both divorce mediators, divorce attorneys. And we were talking about the new laws in New York and New Hampshire and Illinois and Alaska and California, where judges are given the opportunity to decide what's in the best interest of your pet when you get divorced. Someone you've never met before and whom your pet has never met before is going to decide who is the better person for that pet to live with. And so I thought tonight we would take a few minutes. I know this might not apply to anyone here. However, it might apply to someone who's listening, or it might apply to a friend of yours. But it might apply to you too if you have a significant other that you're living with, or you're in a relationship, or you're married, because these things are always so much easier to plan for when you happen to still like the person than if you don't like the person. So the thing that Doug said, he's a former judge, a former legislator, and now he's a mediator. He said something really funny. He goes, "It always mesmerized me that someone would allow a person in a black robe to decide the fate of their family." He said, because you would think they would want to do that themselves, that they would find a consigliere, an attorney who would help them find a path forward instead of creating barriers to a path forward. So I thought that was a really good way to put it, that someone's allowing someone in a black robe to decide for them what's going to happen. And so we focused right in on the pets, and that podcast will be up soon. But it made me think, and what their answers were really interesting, because of course they're coming at it from a different position than I am, because they haven't come to the MAAP call. And they're attorneys who are now sort of mediating, and they have a whole different view on what would happen. And both of them said that they wouldn't necessarily create a pup-nup at the beginning of the relationship or at the onset of buying a pet, because that might be too much too soon. However, they both suggested that maybe 6 months in, everyone sit down and have a conversation about who would get the pet in the event that they broke up, or how would they share the pet in the event they broke up, because that's the most important piece, I think, is if the pet begins to bond with your significant other, which most of us want them to do, because you don't want them, although Junie still is growling a little at Jim, you don't want them not to like your significant other. But it really is important to have this conversation to assure that your pet, whether it's the parrot, I mean, Doug said, I had a guy with a parrot. He said, who didn't know what to do when he was divorcing, wanted to keep the parrot, kept the parrot, but then realized he was about 65 years old and the parrot was only 35 years old. And if any of you know about parrots, this gentleman was on the wrong side of how long that bird was going to live. So he really had to make a plan for the pet. So tonight I wanted to chat with you guys and see what you think, because it was interesting having Gabrielle and Doug talk about it from an entirely different vein. They don't know about the MAP plan very much. I talked a little about it, but not much. And they really wanted to make a plan for the care of the pet in the event a relationship broke up, but that pre-paving a peaceful, future took on a different meaning to them, and they felt that you needed a little bit of a cushion. So without further ado, I think I'm going to check in with everybody. I'm going to check in with you and Tonka. Jan, how's everything going?
All right, thanks. Everything is good. And I'll just chime in, coming from someone who is divorced. And I think part of the gift of having somebody else come in is the fact that they have no emotional connection and you have that objectivity, because sometimes in situations like that, your perspective is very clouded and very one-sided. And the fact that most of us, I don't know that many people that are amicably divorced. So most of the time, there is that where they're totally wrong and they're totally responsible for everything that has gone wrong in the relationship. Like we all go through, and then you kind of acclimate and balance it out and everything gets back into perspective. But it is kind of nice to have somebody who's totally objective and not involved. That being said, I do like the idea of having an agreement sometime along before, so it's not left to the last minute. But was my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's interesting because I like the objectivity, and a mediator will come in as a neutral, but not make the decision for you. And I think that's where I grate a little on a judge coming in, simply because, yes, they're objective, and yes, this is what they do for a living. They decide who gets the baby, right? And my thought is that maybe they should suggest out of the box, taking on a mediation, and this isn't to plug my own business, it's just taking on a mediation process first, so that, as you said, the parties can get a little bit past hating each other. Unfortunately, your pet doesn't hate your ex. You wish they would, but they don't. And trying to see it from the pet's point of view, because what I usually do in my mediations, I have people think about what would happen to the pet if something happened to them, and who would the pet choose to live with. And if you can get over the fact that you hate your ex, most of the time the pet would want to live with your ex. It's the only other person they really know who, when you weren't there, fed them or walked them or did whatever. It was funny. I talked to somebody today who I haven't seen in years, who had a dog of mine, Quincy's sister, and her name was Carita, and with a Q. And she said that she has a dog and she's 13 now. And she said her husband wants to get another one, but she said, wait a minute, you never walk it, you never take it out, you never do anything with it. I think we're done with dogs now, because they're our age, my age, 65. And it's funny, they don't really remember that they maybe take it out once or twice. I've just been away and come back from New Jersey, and my husband sent me pictures every time he walked the dog. And I thought that was fabulous, because those are the only evidence I have that he has ever walked the dog. So I thought it was great that he was taking pictures. However, I think that if there was ever a breakup, Jim and I have it in our discussions, that the dogs would probably go with me, and if there was something that happened to me, or I was going on vacation, or I was traveling for business, we would work something out where he would get the dogs, because he really does love the dogs. And when I'm not around, Junie really loves him. So it's just something to think about when you're with your significant other and you still like them. You're not in the middle of a divorce. But if you're in the middle of a divorce and there's a pet at issue, maybe think about getting a mediator there to try to help you balance out your loathing and detesting of the ex and what your pet may feel. Because we don't want to project on our pets the distaste for our exes, because most of the time, unfortunately, as I said, your pet doesn't hate your ex. Now, if there's an issue about, and most of the time this is the issue, well, if I let my ex take my dog, I'll never return it. And, I always think, I put that in the agreement. So if somebody violates an agreement, then they lose the chance to see the animal again. And that usually keeps, knock on wood, all my mediations, I tend to check in on every 3 to 6 months, bar none. So that's about 150 over the past 10 years that I've done. And each and every one of them have survived. I won't say they survived as they were the day we made the agreement, but they worked it out because I called like every 3 or 6 months, and it was just about the time they were at each other's throats about something. And I helped them not only get over sharing the pet, but get over whatever else they were at each other's throats about. But the pet stayed as the anchor that kept them from killing each other. So it's something to consider. And as I said, having a pup nup or a pup agreement when you're in a relationship, especially if you come into a relationship with a pet, because there's no way you don't want your girlfriend, boyfriend not liking your pet. You want them to like your pet. I had a client once who she was in a relationship, and her significant other bought her all sorts of jewelry with the pet's names on it. And then when they broke up, they took the pet without another thought that this woman would miss these pets that she had taken care of for 7 years. So it's just something that really needs to be addressed. These agreements, if you want to get out, you want to get out, and I get it. You want to get out. And maybe there's some way to enable your ex to see the pet, or at least we all want to be acknowledged and appreciated for how we feel about a pet. And I even have 2 or 3 that the pets went one way and didn't go the other. And yet the person who didn't get the pet felt as if they had been heard, respected, and understood for their desire to have the pet. They recognized that it would be too hard for the ex, or it would be too hard for the pet to go back and forth. And so they, after some appreciation and acknowledgement of how they felt, recognized that it was better for the pet. So that's where you get people. You get people there without the gnashing of teeth. Sally, how are the girls? How's everything going up there? I know they're perfect, but after that,
they've been sleeping all day. They had their tick medicine this morning, so they have just arisen, and it's almost 7 in the evening, but the girls are great. And so life is good here. Fortunately, my husband and I are getting along just fine. So I think they're both okay for the time being.
well, that's good to know, because it is important. It is something to consider. And I think that probably everyone on this call would have the ability to either work it out or call me to help them work it out, because it would be important to them to work it out. So I think that that's the beauty of this call. Stephanie, it's good to see you. How's Yoda?
Hello, Deborah. Thanks so much. Yoda is doing well.
Wonderful, wonderful. And do you have any thoughts on relationship pre-paving?
I mean, usually I would say I prefer some of the structures of like a prenuptial, maybe trying to have like a lawyer present for like both sides of the relationship, or whoever is really involved. I mean, in Canada, I know they have special lawyers like specifically for children going through divorces. So it would be nice to have like a representative for like every single individual involved, all the pets, and like depending on like how the family structure is, having like a lawyer for the pets and then having a lawyer for the spouses, and then coming to like an agreement.
Well, that's really an interesting thought, because that gets to be a little expensive. There are child specialists, and I'm sure there's going to be pet specialists, and there are pet behaviorists. So you can always have them come in and tell you how they think the breed of the pet the temperament of the pet when they evaluate it would do with one person or another, which is usually why when I see the cases come down, I would love for the judges to take that extra moment and have a pet behaviorist come in to see what would be in the best interest of the pet or what the pet would really thrive under. This is another person who doesn't know your pet, but at least is trained in evaluating pets. Because my biggest fear is when judges come in to evaluate independently what's in the best interest of the pet based on information everybody provides. It's emotional. It's quick, all things considered, and there is no chance of rethinking it down the road a piece, you know, like in 6 months reevaluating it, in a year reevaluating it. And there's no connectivity between the possessory person who gets it and the person who doesn't get it, which of course creates, for us, what does that create? That creates no redundancy for the care of the pet. The pet has one owner, and the other person who wanted it doesn't get a chance to have, to maybe have to rescue the dog if something happens to you. So I always just think that it might be better to make a great break from your ex. That might be great, and take the pet with you. And that should be established at the beginning, and it shouldn't be animosity. I know that an attorney I worked with, Catherine Miller, interviewed me for a podcast. And when we were finished with the interview, she said to me, you know, my ex said to me about 10 years after we were divorced, I wish I had asked to see the dog because I really missed him. And she said, you know, I never thought about it. She goes, he didn't ask for it, so I didn't think about it and just kept the dog. And she said, when I went on vacation, or when I would have happily given him the dog to take for the week I was away on vacation, or if I traveled. And that's what I mean. It's when you get over the I'm so angry and hate you piece. If you need an heir and a spare, which we all talk about all the time, it's good to have that heir and a spare written down, especially when it's a relationship. Because we talk about, you know, having caregivers, you know, 3 of them, only one can be a family member. So this is an ex-family member, and maybe you'll have a new family member, and hopefully the, you know, extinguishment of a relationship will be a little less antagonistic, since we all work together here every Wednesday and everybody gets a little bit of tidbit about that. Acknowledge and appreciate doesn't mean you agree, but create some space for the pet to really come out on the top end of everything. Thank you, Stephanie. Susan, how are you? How's Maggie? And what are your thoughts?
Oh, well, Maggie's good. And, you know, she's still got her little ways about her, and we're working on that. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more that getting it resolved ahead of time, so that you're not getting into, or the dog's not in the middle of an angry dispute. I mean, it's no different than with a child, you know, putting the child in the middle of the dispute with the partner.
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, it's easier with a pet to resolve it ahead of time. With a child, it is different, but
yeah, the child isn't really considered property. So in all but those, 5 states, California, Alaska, Illinois, New Hampshire, and New York, they're the only ones that are elevating them a little bit so that you find what's in their best interest. The rest are property. And what I have found is that now courts are deciding that, you know, your sales slip, your vet bills, your AKC papers, your all of those are only one indicia of ownership, and they're still going to decide who is what's, you know, who's the best owner for the pet. So truly, it's so much better to have this conversation and work it out in the best interest of the pet, as opposed to having, you know, a judge do it. And just because you bought the dog, I know that Travis v. Murray, the person bought the dog and paid for all the dog's care, and bought it as a gift for the other person, and the other person got it. In the divorce, they made a decision. They were going to have the judge decide, but at the end they decided together, and they let the dog go to the spouse that stayed at home. And I, of course, raised my hand because, I always think about these things on so many levels. I said, so how is she going to pay the vet bills? And if the pet gets sick, how is she going to find the funds to take care of the pet? Because the other spouse was the caregiver. So I won the pet, but I don't have the funds to care for the pet. And because I've cut out the other person, there's no real ability to have that conversation. We've spoken about that a few times before. So it's my modus operandi. It's always good to take a breath, get mindful of what's really going on, and hoping that you can scoot your need to be right and keep the dog and send your ex packing to getting it right for the pet, in that you have a spare. You have somebody there who knows the pet, loves the pet, and would want to take the pet. Hey, Kieran, any pearls of wisdom you want to weigh in on?
Good evening, Debbie. How are you?
Oh, look
Hi,
at you
Susan.
with the northern lights. I hope you're
No.
outside, because they are in your neck of the woods.
No, this is the Twilight Zone. I promise you, I'm going to tell you something in a couple of moments, and you will agree. Yes, this
Okay.
is the Twilight Zone.
Zone.
So I'm going to start with a very quick joke that I heard many years ago, which is every man's nightmare, as in male. And it's when the man wakes up one day and he discovers, my wife doesn't understand me. My dog doesn't understand me. And the real nightmare is, my dog understands my wife.
Yes, that's true.
That is the nightmare.
Of course. My dog understands me, but I think I understand him better. How have you
Right.
been?
I am going to tell you the weirdest story in a moment, but just to stick on the on mediation and this the sort of something in that one of our most famous politicians from the north of Ireland, John Hume, often said, when he was talking about negotiation between warring fractions, that the only way forward really is mediation. And it's not that you try to trust the other party, but finally you begin to trust yourself.
Absolutely.
And this is something often forgotten in any business or legal process or whatever. And the crazy thing is, when we allowed the legal process to look at the commerce of the situation of who paid what and so on, what I often find weird about that is they talk about commerce in every which way but its original meaning. And do you know where the origin of the word commerce comes from?
No, but I'm going to let you tell me.
When I think about it, co means obviously community or two
Right.
together or more. And what's the French word for thank you?
Merci.
Commerce.
Oh, so thank you
so-
for shopping. Thank you for shopping.
No. It's the collective of a thankful situation.
Ah.
Right. Or if you like, mercy as in merciful. So it's that way of thinking and that combination of things. So if you're looking for what's the best commercial solution to everybody, it should be there within the spirit of a mediated rather than a processed outcome.
Well, I'm just going to have you on Why Do Pets Matter, because we've been trying, and you and I have been missing each other, but it's okay. I don't take it personally, and I hope you don't take it personally. It's just that we haven't had our calendars. God bless.
We will have that soon, Debbie. Right? Are you ready for the Twilight Zone story?
Yes, I am.
And believe it or not, there's one of your fellow professionals, a lawyer, in the middle of it.
Of course.
As there would be. Yes, right. I am actually back in Ireland at the moment.
Wow. From Tenerife. So Stephanie, just for background,
No,
Kieran has been here for years. I literally tell you for years. And he is our sole non-pet owner who wrote a great book called When Your Child Asks for a Pet, Let One-Eyed Leo Guide the Conversation, so that people know what their responsibilities of pet ownership is. It's a great book. It's coming out. We've all supported him. We've all given him edits, and we love him being here. That is why we appreciate his stories, because he keeps us on the bright side. So now tell us the story. You're back in Ireland from Tenerife, and I don't know why, but okay.
no, I was in France for a while.
Oh, France for a while. Okay, yeah.
Yes. You know, that
We all have been in the same place forever.
as
You're the only one moving around.
as it says in the Bible, you can't live on bread alone. You have to have Spanish wine or French wine. So.
It says that in the Bible. I have to go look that up.
This is the Irish Bible, my special edition. Okay. Right. This is the Twilight Zone stuff. Which was I got a phone call about a month ago to say the dog internet project, which you've been a part of, reached the final of a national investment competition in Ireland. So I thought, okay, we'll go back for the pitch for the interview. And one of the difficulties was that after the pitch, there's almost a 2-month waiting list, even if you win the competition, for the investment and everything to kick in. And part of it, which looks very attractive, is you get an office in a university, and you get the support of 2 or 3 universities and interns and all of this. So I was sort of wondering, okay, will I go back for the interview, and would it be possible to hold on to what I was doing in France at the time and everything? So when they called me to tell me I got to the final, I put the phone down, and about a minute later, I get this phone call from somebody in Ireland saying, oh, I got your number from somebody who you helped out with dogs and horses, and I've dogs that spook horses and so on. So I was talking away about the whole dog internet project and the One-Eyed Leo and the course we're bringing out. And the crucial part to all of, as you know, Debbie, and we've talked about this many times, is the core of this entire project is the fact that 200 years ago, there was a lawyer called Richard Martin, and he was the brains behind the first SPCA. He was the architect of the first animal charity. He was also a member of Parliament, and he introduced and got the first legislation on animal welfare in the world passed. So I was explaining to this farm owner that this is what I was trying to do, and she says, oh, well, you know, I'm a festival organizer, and last year I organized a play about Richard Martin.
Wow.
And I thought, that's a coincidence, right? So anyway, I go back for the interview, and the thing that's important here is I got to this final similar stage a few years ago, and none of the judges could actually make sense of what the project might be or how it would work, and it died a quick death. So this time I went in for the interview. And now when I say Twilight Zone, here it comes. So finished the presentation, and the first judge in the panel, you've to face 5 judges. So the first one says, I have to declare something here. I have a dog that I got from a rescue shelter. And I thought, yeah, good start. Second judge, I have something to declare too. I got a dog from a rescue shelter. So we're up to 2. Now, I thought if you get 2 out of 5, I mean, you're lucky. 3, 4. So it came to the 5th judge. So the 3rd judge and the 4th judge says, yeah, I have a dog from a rescue shelter. And then the 5th judge, I thought there's no way. So I said to him, I'm sure there's no way you could have a dog from a rescue shelter too. And he says, you're right. I don't have a dog. I have 2 dogs from rescue shelters. So
I was thinking he was going to have a cat from a rescue shelter.
You know, right. So I thought that's it. So when you're so far, so the question's finished, and when you're ahead, get out quick. Shut up and get out quick. So I was about to get out of the room, and in the room at the corner, there was a timekeeper, a fellow who puts up his iPad and watches you, what gives you the clock of
The
the
5
time.
minute, right? You've got 1 minute, right?
Well, you've 8 minutes, and
Yep.
when your time is gone, you have to get your presentation within that, and they can only question you on what you present within the 8 minutes. So now this was an employee of the agency, and I was just about to leave the room, and then he grabs me by the shoulder, and I thought, oh, this isn't what you want. And he picks up his iPad and shows this picture to everybody and says, "This is a dog I got from the dog pound." So I thought, this is a little bit crazy. So it's like 7 dogs, 5 judges.
And the
Uh,
timekeeper.
I'm the timekeeper. So I'm on the way out, and the handler, as they're called in Ireland, that's the man with the clock, who, when you get to the final, you have a facilitator guiding you through the process.
Right.
So when we got out the door, I thought we were going to shake hands and I'll see you again. He said, "Okay, and there's somebody down the hall that wants to meet you." And so he brought me down to the overall manager of the project. And she dragged me into a corner and says, "Oh, I saw your application." Now, she didn't, in theory, have a vote on this. And she spent 5 minutes showing me photos of her dog and said,
From the rescue shelter.
from the rescue shelter. And she said, "Before I worked on this, I was the manager of," and I can't say the name, but a major Irish charity in Ireland that looks after animals.
Wow.
And so anyway, to cut a long story short, the information was they would call us within a week to tell us if we got the place or not. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll go out west for the next week. But next morning they called me and said, "Yeah, you've won it."
Yay!
So, which is nice. So our collective project here will have, we basically have full funding to work day and night for the next 6 months, plus universities and all the rest of it. And I think the major point here is, when I talk to the charities and everybody else now, they will certainly talk to us very differently.
That is so fabulous.
Yeah.
That story is so perfect because, I talk about the GAVAs all the time, right? The guardian angel virtual assistant. Yeah, they were all in the room.
Well, I'll tell you, this is where I wanted to finish the twilight part of it. So I go over to this farm, and it's in the west of Ireland. And the house where I'm staying was once upon the land owned by the lawyer Richard Martin.
The GAVAs are like taking you by the hand, Kieran.
Yeah.
They are taking you by the hand. If you don't get it, that you are on the right path and that you're doing God's work, they can't make it any clearer for you.
Well, there's a lot of other things that happen, but these are stories for another day. And I am not joking. It really is Twilight Zone stuff. It's.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
So,
go ahead.
Sorry, no. I had one conversation today, and this is the type of thing that's been happening for the last few weeks, which was the woman Claire who organized the festival who organized the play about Richard Martin. Finally, I had a call with the man who wrote the play, and as it turns out, he happens to be a school teacher, and he's going to proof the One-Eyed Leo book for the school that he works in.
Oh, fabulous.
Which is fabulous. And so I'm meeting him in a couple of weeks' time, I hope. And there's what was it? There was Richard Martin. When he was an MP, he was also the founder of a theatre. And the writer and Claire, festival organizer, are trying to find ways to bring that theatre back to life again.
They could make a play on One-Eyed Leo.
I have no idea what's going to happen, but I do actually know it will happen.
Okay, so everybody
the
heard
sense.
me say that right here, right? So when it happens, you'll say, Deborah said that back in, April of 2023.
Yeah. Well, next year is the bicentenary of the foundation of the SPCAs.
You've written their story for them. You've written
Yeah.
the theater production to really celebrate his life. How great is that, Kieran?
Well, no, it's funny you mentioned that, because that was actually the central part of the conversation I had with Sean this afternoon, which was Sean's a playwright, and he believes Richard Martin was the most, this is an interesting word, consequential Irishman ever. And there's a lot
Well,
of,
for
in
pet
other words,
owners, he was.
he
And for
certainly
the animals,
was.
he was. Yeah.
Yeah. And there were two men involved in the foundation of the SPCA. So one was a church leader called Arthur Broom, and he was a sort of a social magnate. He was sort of the natural connector for society, and he would have been he was on first name terms with the likes of William Wilberforce, who was the voice who ended the slave trade. Wilberforce, I think he was the Prime Minister of Britain at 24 or something like this. He was the youngest ever. But what was what not maybe fascinating isn't the word, but what's quite crucial about the lives of these two men with the centenary coming up is both Martin and Arthur Broom were airbrushed from history by the SPCAs.
Wow.
That if you look at any SPCA, they say, oh, the society was founded in the slaughterhouse and so on. But the work that Richard Martin's put in the years previous to it is almost never mentioned. There's almost no connection. And then the work that Arthur Broom put in is never mentioned. Now, there is, I'm not going to say good reasons, I'm going to say understandable reasons for the culture at the time. And the way to look at this was in Martin's case, he was a lawyer that often made mincemeat of bad arguments in Parliament, and everybody was really afraid of him. And then he practiced as a lawyer at the same time. And back in the 1820s, or I suppose the beginning of the 18th century, dueling, in other words, shooting your opponent was normal procedure, or sorry, accepted procedure. So if he was losing a legal argument, he often challenged the opponent to a duel. And therefore he seldom, if ever, lost a legal case. Now, I promise
you. And we thought the 21st century was rough, but obviously not so much.
Well, I put it this way, Debbie, the standards where you can get a lawyer who you really know will fight for you are not up to scratch anymore. But anyway, so anyway, a lot of the parliamentarians didn't like Richard Martin, and he was thrown out of Parliament because they discovered he rigged the election in Galway to get elected.
Oh, shoot.
But as a lawyer, he said the only way you could win an election in that county was to rig it. Which it sounds like the Trump defense, all right, but that's
I think so. Yeah, I've heard that before.
So anyway, he ran up gambling debts amongst other things, and he had to take exile in Brittany and France, where I came from before I went to Ireland.
So he was a little bit of a character that they might not want to associate with the altruism of the SPCA.
Yeah, this was after he had founded it. So the crux of this was that he tried to get a bill passed on the 15th of June, 1824, and then the society founders were to meet the next day in this cafe. And the idea was, if they got his bill passed into Parliament, then all horse owners would have to prove resources and responsibility before the horse changed hands. Now, if you think about it, that was completely novel, and it hasn't been repeated today, where if you're going to adopt a pet or buy a pet or whatever, or an animal, you have to actually come up with documentation to say, yes, I have the resources to look after this animal for at least a month.
Yeah, that's not there.
It's not there.
That.
Right. Now, it is on the way, for the simple reason, with your work, Debbie, with the MAAP plan, that's all about the eventuality and forward thinking. It's not about cleaning up a mess after it happens. And the beauty of it is the dog internet is dedicated to the way Richard Martin used to think, or this particular episode. And it's nice to think the state where he came from, Ireland, has finally 200 years later invested in that idea.
Well, I have to say, I love that story. I think that, there is a lot of richness in One-Eyed Leo to help tell the story of Richard Marx. And, you always bring it around to how it has to be about making sure the pets, are in a good situation and more peacefully than litigation or shooting you if you're losing or any of that stuff. I never thought of that when I was a district attorney, to take out my gun and aim it at somebody to make sure I won. And I never thought of that. Shit, what was I thinking?
You thought, Debbie, is terrible.
I know, I was such a pansy weight, but anyway, I'm going to let everybody go because it's that I can't top that story. And we know that these, plans that we're making for the care of our pets and everything that Kieran has done with One-Eyed Leo and the internet of the dog pets,
the dog internet, the dog
internet is really connecting people to take the best care of their pets proactively instead of reactively. I think we're trying to shift that paradigm from reactivity and negativity to proactivity and positivity. So on that note, I'm so glad you're here, Kieran. Please come back next time, and please send me some dates, because we have to do a Why Do Pets Matter podcast and you have to retell that story. It's great to see you, Jan. I love Tonka. Give him a kiss for me. Great to see you, Sally. Stephanie, thanks, and give my kisses to Yoda. Susan, of course. Anybody want to make a last comment on Kieran's story? Because I think we all are going to congratulate him up and down. I'm so happy for you. Any last comments? Anybody wants to jump in? They all love you, Kieran, so they're not going to, I've already taken the words out of their mouths. They are, so send me some little write-up if you would, because I'd love to have Rose put it out, that one of our wonderful MAAP people, yes, has gotten this wonderful award in Ireland. I would love that. So send me a little information. I'll put it all out, because I'd like you to know that Marty Greer, who has been on this call a few times, remember, she's the theranogenologist. She was just awarded the AKC Veterinarian of the Year. And not that I had anything to do with it, but I did put it out on my social media. So I'm hoping that people voted for her, and maybe that's why she got it. Who knows? But she said to me, please put it out. So many people. And so Marty Greer won the AKC Veterinarian of the Year. She's a fabulous reproductive vet, and she's a lawyer. So she's way overeducated. So until next week, I will not be here next week. Thank you, Rose, for reminding me. I will not be here next week because I will be in Kentucky at the Equine Conference. So in 2 weeks, I will see you. I think that's the 15th or the 16th. Let me double check. Or no, it's not that late in May. God help me. Or maybe it is that late in May. It is the 10th of May. I will be back. I will not be here the 3rd, but I'll be here the 10th. So until the 10th, kiss Tonka and Roxy and Athena and Yoda and Maggie for me. And I'm just going to kiss you, Kieran, because I'm so thrilled for you. You have no idea.
Very quickly, the
Go
10th
ahead.
is the 10th is my birthday, so I'll definitely see you.
Yes, absolutely. We will be here with bells on. We will be here with bells on. Love you, honey. You guys take care, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.